Hi, everyone. Um, Before we start, I'll introduce myself formally in a moment when we start the presentation. But before we start, I did want to ask a few folks to come up. I would like to start with our Director of Operations at Pratt Center, Shantae Ramsey.
Is this the mic? Okay, all right. Hello, good evening. I'm so happy to see everyone here. I'm also checking in on folks online as well. Welcome to our wonderful event. This is really a culminating event to the hard work that Tara and the Pratt Center team has put together. And this is just the beginning. There's a lot of data and stories that have been uncovered that we'll talk about in length all evening. We have just a wonderful thanks to Small Business Services, to Office of Nightlife for their support. Just as this is just a momentous occasion. I grew up in Brooklyn, in New York City, so I remember the clubs that I wasn't supposed to go to, but I did. And so I think it's a resurgence, and I think the work that she has done is commendable. So definitely want to give kudos to just bringing light to all the history of New York, what it was, what it is, and what it can be. And so, no further. I just want to just turn it over to our wonderful partner in all this work. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Shinta. And thank you, Tara. Really, it's been great, obviously, working with you since I first came into the office and last year on City of Yes, right, to really change the regulations on dancing in this city. And obviously, I see Greg Miller here, who's one of our panelists, who's a great partner. And advocacy in this industry is so important. Good evening, everyone. And thank you to the Pratt Center for convening this important conversation. And again, to GJ Tara for your continued leadership and advocating for New York City nightlife. I'm Jeffrey Garcia. I'm the Executive Director at the Office of Nightlife at SBS. Our role is to serve as a non enforcement liaison, helping businesses navigate city government while supporting safer, more resilient, and more inclusive nightlife across our city. We view nightlife as much more than entertainment. It's an economic engine, a cultural ecosystem, and for many New Yorkers, essential safe spaces. Nightlife has long provided spaces where marginalized communities can gather, create culture, and build community, often long before those spaces were recognized or celebrated. Last year, we launched our city's first ever nightlife grant program, investing directly into organizations, strengthening the broader nightlife ecosystem through cultural programming, workforce development, harm reduction, and business support. Congratulations to the Pratt Center on being one of those grantees. We're proud to support the project and important research documenting the city's ever changing nightlife landscape. This project helps all of us better understand where nightlife has been, how neighborhoods have changed, and why preserving cultural spaces must be part of the planning for New York's future. Our hope is that projects like this don't simply document the nightlife history, but inform better policies that allow independent venues and cultural spaces to thrive. Other nightlife grant recipients are advancing this work in complementary ways, from creating the city's first dedicated community center for queer nightlife workers, QNCC, artists and cultural producers, to expanding workforce development and paid training opportunities for next generation of venue professionals, to providing bystander intervention training to help make safer spaces with Outsmart NYC. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to everyone who works continuously to shape New York City's nightlife. And again, like I continue saying, advocacy. We need help here in government. We can't do it alone. We need advocates. The next big step in our industry is getting rid of some of the regulations around music and how community boards look at how music is played in venues, right? We should be regulating the sound, not the way it's played. We need DJs, more live entertainment in our city. So I look forward to working with all of you to make that a reality. Thank you.
Hey. All right. Thank you both so much for your introductions. So yeah, this is gonna be fun. Okay, because we have multiple screens going on. Um, this is just an agenda. I will introduce myself. I will present. We're going to have a discussion with David Banks, aka DJ Disciple, and Greg Miller from Dance Parade NYC, and we'll have Q&A both from you all, and then also this is a hybrid, so we have people on Zoom, so I'll be fielding some questions there. So if the folks online, if you have any questions, feel free to. We will try to get to those as well. So yeah, I realized introductions and I didn't really introduce myself. So let me introduce myself. All right, my name is Tara Duvivier. I'm a senior planner at Pratt Center for Community Development. And Pratt Center for Community Development works to build community power and ensure the equitable distribution of resources for low income, Black, Indigenous people of color in New York City. How do we do this? We do this by partnering with frontline community-based organizations to provide research, participatory planning, policy, advocacy, and implementation support. My work at Pratt Center focuses around community engagement, research, and advocacy around land use that is community-based, not top-down. I also DJ, and I have been involved in nightlife for more than half my life. Um, Over time, I've been growing my work to incorporate concerns around arts and culture, nightlife, and planning. I've written about it, and I've also co-convened conversations around zoning changes impacting nightlife, as Jeffrey mentioned, and throwing as well as co-convening events on how to throw events in public spaces and how we can reimagine the club space in New York City nightlife. So everyone in this room has an interest or at least some curiosity about nightlife and its role in cities. So I'm going to do a little quick poll. How many of you all work in nightlife? All right. How many of you work in planning or government? And how many of you just enjoy nightlife? Yes. Okay. All right. So when I talk to people about nightlife, they generally have a sense of what I'm talking about, but the default idea always seems to be about bars and clubs. And that can be a stopping point when engaging people in nightlife conversations because they may not go to bars and clubs. So I made this video, which some of you may have seen on my social media. So I'm just going to play it because it's short and it's cute. What do you think when you hear the word nightlife? Trying to define this word has been the main block I've had in rolling out content for this page because what is it? It's different things for different people. Some people don't even think they're into nightlife, but the homie Timotep said it best. Nightlife is everything you know, right? Everybody hates work. Yeah, right? So people go outside, they socialize, have their real lives, like that's what they cherish, and that's what makes their experience. Is the fun you have after work. In a city like New York, there's something for everyone. It doesn't even have to happen at night. It's where we get together to socialize. And in these times, it is important for us to remain connected. I want to talk about nightlife through lenses we don't often see or think about because it's a measure of a city's greatness. It's culture, it's infrastructure, and most importantly, it's a social good. Getting together and having shared experience. So when we lose nightlife spaces, we lose the opportunity to have these experiences. My name is Tara. I'm a DJ, and I'm also an urban planner at the Center for Community Development in New York City. Through a grant from the Office of Nightlife of the City of New York, I'm going to map nightlife spaces, past and present, and share with you what I learn along the way. I hope you join me here to talk about when this used to be a club. All right. So nightlife, thank you. Nightlife is often categorized in a way that's limiting when most of us engage in some form of nightlife regularly. Oh, and this one's going to play on my, whoop, trying to move it. I got two things going. What do you think when you hear the word night? There we go. This Used to Be a Club is a data and mapping project that aims to understand how changes in New York City over time have impacted nightlife and its sustainability. As mentioned in the video, we received a small grant from not a small grant, but I did, but sorry, I didn't mean it like that. A grant from the Office of Nightlife to start this project, beginning with Manhattan venues from 1980 to present. And the goal is to have a citywide map pending additional resources because this is quite the undertaking. So why this project? When it comes to advocacy and policy, oftentimes the type of data that is analyzed is economic, demonstrating that something has value in order to build that case that it should be supported. That's always been something that concerns me, knowing that there is more importance and value than just dollars, excuse me. In 2018, a report was released by the City of New York to break down nightlife's economic impact, and it was noted that the nighttime economy is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Despite its economic importance, the city doesn't plan for or consider nightlife in broader policy. We don't really plan for arts and culture in general, but that's another conversation for another day. We don't plan for nightlife in the way that we plan for waterfronts, where the way we plan for vacant buildings, or the way we plan for climate change. And some people may say, why should we plan for nightlife? It's just a bunch of rowdy people and noise. But the waterfront is infrastructure. Vacant buildings are a resource. Climate change is preparing for the future. My answer, which is also a question, is not life, not infrastructure. One of our most relevant examples lately being Madison Square Garden. And pictured here is Sugar Hill Supper Club, which is one of the oldest nightlife establishments in New York City, which is Black owned. Is it not a resource? There are organizations like Backline, which provides mental health support to musicians. The Queer Nightlife Community Center, which Jeffrey noted, which is also a Nightlife grant recipient, whose aim is to support queer and transgender people working in nightlife, provide workforce training for those who wish to work in nightlife, and supporting the residents of East New York, where the center is located. And the Office of Nightlife's campaign to prevent overdose deaths by providing Narcan and training on how to administer it to establishments around the city. And is nightlife not preparing for the future? Organizations like Building Beats, National Independent Venues Association, and Hue Arts creating educational opportunities for young people who wish to make music and curation their career path. These are all more formalized versions of what we may have seen in nightlife since we started to go out, and things that have carried over from earlier generations that use nightlife as a means to organize themselves for survival and equal rights. It continues, and in my observation, is growing as nightlife communities have had to organize during the pandemic shutdown to support each other as so many people lost their income so quickly. The pandemic shutdown exposed long-standing equity issues that can no longer be ignored and has created an opportunity for us to think about how to address equity, ownership, living wages, and other challenges that exist in our current nightlife landscape. The cultural impact of New York City nightlife is monumental. Nightlife is where some of the most impactful genres developed. From jazz and rock to hip hop to house and techno, it happened in the club, and a lot of it happened right here in New York City in spaces from Lenox Lounge to CBGB's to the Rec Room at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. This month, known as Black Music Month, is an opportunity for us to remember that these genres are Black music, and nightlife is critical in advancing these genres and creating new forms. It's also Pride Month, and we must acknowledge the role queer and transgender people have had in these genres as well. I hope this project can bring light to some of these people and spaces and their importance to the city, and especially highlight these disparities so that we can do better by those who helped contribute to the city's cultural greatness. So I'm gonna play a game because I just want to be yapping all this time. So I've seen a lot of change in New York, and I'm sure many of you have. And there is a temporary element to nightlife. So we're used to spots closing. But I began to notice a lot more spaces closing and being replaced with things not even close to being nightlife. So I'd walk around, I'd encounter a location of a space I used to go to and say, this used to be a club. And I even made this a game with my friends, and I do it in the group chat. So I wanted to play it with y'all if y'all are down. Yeah? Okay. So let's guess this club. Hmm? That's Palladium. So yes, This is Palladium, which had been around as a nightlife space since the 1930s. And in the late 1990s, right before I was about to go up in the Palladium, NYU purchased the property and made it a dormitory. And they also called it Palladium. Guess this one. Okay, over here. There's a ringer, a little ringer in the back over here. Yeah, this is APT. This is honestly, this is personally my favorite club space, which was in the meatpacking district, not too far from here. It was vacant for some time because I used to walk by it and it would just be like a construction shed, and I'd be really sad. And then one day I passed by and it was a caviar store, and I it was very even sadder. Yeah. And then last one. Mm-mm. It is. Yep. It's on Atlantic. Yeah, it's on Atlantic. You close? Anyone? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Milk River. So this was Milk River, and this is like a reverse limelight because the club became a church. So, like, how do we get here, right? That's really been the question for me, just walking around, seeing all of this change, trying to get an understanding, using my planner brain, my nightlife brain, and just having lived here most of my life. And that's really what drove me to want to do this project. So, a few things and a few factors. I want to do a quick tutorial for y'all to know how familiar you all are with zoning, which can be, some of us more than we care to be familiar with. But just to give like a quick tutorial, we pretty much have, well, zoning is really how land gets regulated. Not every city does it differently. Some cities don't do it at all. But in New York City, we have three distinct zoning types. We have residential, of course, where people live, commercial, businesses, and manufacturing, so industry, things of that sort. So they do intermingle, but the distinctions are really there to provide some sort of like protection or separation from uses. So we don't want to have housing where it's like super toxic industrial stuff happening, or it might be really loud machinery, but you might live near manufacturing. And of course, a lot of us live above storefronts or live near a lot of like a heavy commercial district. So there is a mix of use. The population growth and affordable housing crisis has resulted in a lot of zoning changes to support more housing. So many residential parts of New York City have had zoning changes to allow for even more density, so more housing. So can anyone guess, like of the three types of zoning, residential, commercial, manufacturing, which type commands the most rent, which can charge the highest amount of rent? Residential. Residential is the most expensive. It's the most lucrative. So when we think about the type of housing that gets built and why it's so expensive and why maybe affordable housing isn't quite affordable, just something to keep in mind. But I feel like, yeah, you're a little surprised by the answer. You thought it would be commercial, but it's actually, and especially, I mean, we think about the big office buildings, office space. I mean, that's on a decline. What's more in demand is housing, which is why we're seeing a lot of zoning changes that are taking spaces that are commercial, that are manufacturing into residential. And that's kind of the problem, right? Historically, these zones have been where nightlife existed, where DIY spaces and other spaces for arts and culture existed, because they were typically farther away from where people lived, and it was typically cheaper to rent by the square foot, because what you need to do to dance is you need space, right? So this shift in manufacturing businesses and jobs outside of New York and the pressure to build more housing has resulted in zoning changes of former manufacturing zones to zoning that supports what they're calling mixed use. So it's residential, commercial, and what they call light manufacturing. So it's not going to be, some big machinery place with like that's loud and toxic, but it might be somebody who makes jewelry or things of that sort. That's like a little less invasive. So in theory, all of these uses can exist in the same area, but if one of these uses commands the most rent and is in the most demand, that's really what's going to get built the most. And that's really where the conflicts come in, because you're going to have a lot more housing and the conflicts with these together. So these are just some recent examples. So I went to the top far right, the last calls we know. Bedvine Brew last year unfortunately closed, which I think is it's really sad, especially since they own the space. Just dealing with a lot of pressures from local police authorities. Um, Bottom right, this is actually from some time ago because he has since passed away, but that is Bill Lee, who's Spike Lee's dad. He lived over by Washington, Fort Greene Park. He, for decades, had jazz jam sessions in his home. None of the neighbors had issue with it until newer neighbors came in and started to call police on him for playing jazz music in his house. Top left is Ode to Babel. They ended up closing for other reasons, but they did have an issue with local neighbors around noise, and their liquor license was being threatened until the community rallied together to go to the community board meeting to support them. And this most recent example, we're in Pride Month, and Ginger's last month had announced that they had to cancel a majority of their Pride Month DJ events due to noise complaints. So there's also demographic changes. It's been widely known that, or maybe not, we'll see, maybe I'll surprise y'all, that the Black population in New York City has been declining since 2000. The very same people who stayed and created and contributed to this city during what was considered its worst times are being pushed out. The organization Center for Urban Future released reports regularly called Creative New York that provide a snapshot of the state of the creative sector in New York City. And in their latest report released last year, they showed a decline in artists residing in New York City. These shifts will have real consequences as it becomes more challenging to live and create here. How does New York City retain its status of cultural capital of the world if the people who create and nurture the culture can't afford to live here? This is from a report from the Robin Hood Foundation from 2024 that found that young adult New Yorkers are experiencing high rates of poverty with fewer avenues to advance economically. So this can have so many impacts on nightlife sustainability if young adults don't have jobs to support themselves. Nightlife is becoming increasingly expensive. This also feeds into isolation many young people experience, not having money to experience nightlife regularly. Oop. Hit me. I'm going backwards now. Oh, so how do we start? So this is where I kind of this is me like after having received the grant. How do we start? I mean, I had a sense because I put a project proposal together, but a project like this really hasn't been done before, and this was really like my biggest question and worry. So I kind of broke down a very basic overview of what I wanted to do in terms of figuring out what kind of data I wanted to collect, how to go about collecting it in a way that it would be best, and then just starting. So determining what kind of data to collect, I did speak with other urban planners and people that I know who have expressed interest in accessing and having access to this type of data. But for me, it was important to look at this from another perspective because historically, nightlife has been underground for various communities for valid reasons. So while I wanted to document spaces, it was important that the data wouldn't compromise nightlife communities in any spaces that they currently operate in. So this is where community partners came in who served as advisors to addressing these sensitive issues. And then from there, I just started to collect the data. So I do want to shout out the community partners because some of them are here. Dance Parade, which you'll hear more about later when we speak with Greg. Promotes dance through the celebration of diversity by presenting as many forms of dance as possible. They believe that live performance has the potential to awaken a human spirit, a communal human spirit, and build a more equitable and vibrant society. In their pursuit to celebrate and elevate dance, they have led many campaigns to address the illegality of dance in New York City, from the cabaret law repeal to zoning changes and liquor license rules that restrict venues that allow dancing. Afro Mosaic Soul is a Brooklyn-based dance collective dedicated to preserving and celebrating the culture of New York City's underground club community with a strong focus on house dance. They promote a positive lifestyle through regular dance workshops, social events, and community panels. And 651 Arts, which is a nearly 40-year-old arts organization. Their mission is to deepen awareness and appreciation for contemporary arts and culture of the African diaspora and to provide professional and creative opportunities for artists of African descent. They invest in artists in a variety of ways, including professional and artistic development, commissions, and residencies, and they produce programming for our immediate community and the general public to participate in intergenerational, lifelong learning, civic and social engagement through meaningful exposure to art, artists, and ideas. These community partners were also helpful in sharing data that they've collected in their own advocacy efforts and in their own documentation and archives. So this is just a sample of sources I've used so far, and there are many, many more that we have yet to go through. Books, magazines, other periodicals have been really helpful. And as somebody who lived by the Village Voice offices and would grab a copy every Tuesday night, literally still warm from the press, the power of print here is not lost on me. And then there have been archival projects such as the New York City LGBTQ Historic Sites Project, Queer Happened Here, There Is No Planet Earth. Um, and they've also been helpful and a testament to the importance of community-based archiving. Please document your culture. I just wanted to note the guide to the far right by Emma Warren from the UK. It's an ebook. It's like €8 or 8 whatever pound. It's a great book to come check it out. But really shouts to her because she's actually, in addition to this manual, has documented a few different subcultures in the UK, and those books are amazing. And also wrote a book called Dance Your Way Home. So shouts to Emma. So what kind of data am I collecting? So typical venue data, of course, I need the name, I want the address, the venue size, which is something that came up. People want to know the kinds of space, have there been a change over time in the spaces, which I imagine so because of real estate. And that's a little bit challenging. So we're hoping to get this through records from the departments of buildings. Sorry, kind of bothered Ahmed on Tuesday, and the timeline. We want to know if it's open, and if so, the year it opened, the year it closed. If it's closed, and wherever possible, noting the reason for the closure. So I'm using news articles, blogs, and websites, and recording the sources for these pieces of data so I can go back. So if it's like, who said that this place closed in 1999? I know where I got that piece of information. So types of venues, so bars and clubs, but it's not just that. It was really important to note the varied range of nightlife and spaces that were ancillary but important to nightlife, like recording studios and record shops. Genres of music, which is, of course, important. But this, for me, was a little tricky because there's so many genres and subgenres, and so people might find the categories a little basic when we put the data out. So forgive me, but I'm, happy to talk about it and figure out maybe ways for it to be more nuanced. There are some amazing resources that have noted that were important to queer life and history, which could be important to someone working with the data if they're doing that kind of analysis. So we're noting this and verifying the sources of this as well to confirm that a space was a venue that supported the queer community. And I'm a planner, so this is data right here that's really important to me. Where these are located as far as which community boards, which neighborhoods, what was the zoning when the venue was open and what is it today? Because I had noted these zoning changes. Did the zoning changes have an impact on whether or not these spaces remained open? Work that we do at Pratt Center, we have a few reports just on rezonings throughout the city. A lot of times when there are proposed rezonings, you will start to see a lot of heavy real estate activity because people are going to start speculating because they know a rezoning's coming. We did a lot of work on that, so I want to see if we could do similar analysis here. And then also, not every building still exists, so some were redeveloped, and I want to incorporate photographs of the sites as they currently exist with the original locations. So this is a snapshot of a very, very rough draft of our map. So far, it is very, 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 very rough. And then this is also a very, very, very rough draft. This is not what the map will look like in its final form, but people will be able to click on a point on the map and have the information displayed. So this is there's way more information, but I just picked like relevant things. I don't know. I don't even think I went to 108K, but this is 108K, the address, the zip code, the community board code, the status, the opening year, the closing year. They closed in 2020. They actually owed the landlord and they got evicted. So I have that as a reason. The type of club. So yeah, so this is just a sample of what this will look like when it's actually done. So So lessons learned. There have been thousands of venues that existed in New York City and thousands that exist today. My database, while it's only for one borough and for a specific period of time, is right now a little under 700 entries. So I know I have a ways to go. It's been a challenge to collect the type of information I'm looking for every single venue. I mean, not every space was documented to the degree that I'm looking to present. So I do think a lot of the data that I'm looking for is out there, but I just need to do deeper dives. I need to look into more government data, historical data, and just other sources that I haven't explored yet. And another lesson learned is that this information is actually, I feel, critical to ensuring the future of New York City nightlife. The more overwhelming it felt, the more apparent it came that this data is important, not just for other planners and policy people, but for people who are looking to find information for documenting culture and spaces that were important to scenes and genres. Erasure is something that we see with pioneers and early DJs, producers of house, techno, and hip hop, largely Black and Latino people who are not the top earners. They often face challenges in receiving royalties and control of their intellectual property while continuing to face structural systemic racism. So this is also important because we've seen the demographics of the city shift. There are residents who are new to the city who do not have the history or context of living in neighborhoods where nightlife exists or existed. Part of what makes this city great is that there are different levels and forms of nightlife in every neighborhood. Neighborhood residents perceive nightlife to be a quality of life issue when it's part of the overall workings of a city. This lack of understanding contributes to the conflicts, and this information could be a vehicle for more effective conversations and engagement around nightlife. So, our next steps. Entering more data. We're still going through sources and filling in data gaps. We will prepare the data, and it will be a data set that will be online in the fall, hopefully on GitHub, and we will have an actual nicer looking map for people to interact with on a website. And we do want this project to be citywide. This grant funding allowed us to do this, and we chose Manhattan because it was the hub for so many of us, and the changes are clear in between what happened in Manhattan 40 years ago and today, or 50, no, 40. Ooh. Um, so it's clear that that this information is important, and we are seeking funding to expand this project to the other boroughs. But I am still collecting data for the other boroughs. Community engagement. I really had envisioned this project to be one where we can engage with the public and learn from them because not every spot is in a book or a magazine. I want to work through ways to engage the public in ways that are manageable to us because it's like really just a very small, Pratt Center is a very small organization, small but mighty. We'd love to interview people for an oral history. We want to scan photographs and make this into a real archive if the resources allow. So this is my big picture dream for this project. And if you want to get involved, I think some of you got the one pager outside. There is a QR code. It will take you to a very basic Google form. You can fill it out. If there are spaces that you remember, please share as much information as you can remember, and we will take it from there. We'll do the research. These spaces also don't have to just be in Manhattan, even though I said this project is Manhattan from 1980 to now. I'm collecting information on spots in all of the other boroughs because I do want this to be citywide. So yeah, and as I mentioned, there are copies of this outside, so thank you. This is so now I'm really excited because I want us to pivot so I can stop yapping. And I would really like to invite our panelists to the front and have a seat with me. So yeah, David Banks, better known as DJ Disciple, is a New York DJ, producer, author, and cultural historian whose career spans over 4 decades across underground music, house music, global nightlife, bottle service culture, and community-based dance music movements. From Wild Pitch and The Choice to Ibiza, Le Souk, and Brooklyn's deep underground revival, his work documents the evolution of nightlife culture from the 1970s through today. Co-authored with Henry Kronk, his book, The Beat, the Scene, the Sound, combines memoir, oral history, and cultural commentary to preserve the stories, people, and spaces that shape New York City nightlife history. All right. Greg Miller brings a wealth of experience in arts administration and a lifelong passion for dance to his role as executive director of Dance Parade. Prior to joining Dance Parade in 2006, Greg spent 14 years in management for Fortune 500 companies. He then transitioned his talents to the nonprofit sector, co-producing the Fall Collection, a mixed media festival on the Lower East Side. Greg founded Dance Parade in 2007. A firm believer in dance as a fundamental right, he leads a coalition advocating for legal reform through legalizeddance.org. Greg embodies Dance Parade's vision of one parade, many cultures, actively encouraging participation from diverse and vibrant dance forms. Under his leadership, Dance Parade has fostered a cross generational and multicultural network, uniting people through the shared language of dance. Hello, test, test. Okay.
Yep.
All right, and I guess I'm in the middle. All right. Okay. So, okay. Um, I did both, do introductions for you both, but, please, with your own words, tell us about yourself, your work, and why nightlife is important to you.
Nightlife to me is infrastructure, and it's not just um, infrastructure in the sense of it's more about, for me, a gathering of communities of people that come together for the music. The music is the main catalyst that attracts everyone together, and with that unison, we bring in all different kind of communities, from Black to Latin, LGBTQ, just people that love and enjoy music, and they're entailed with promoters, with dancers, with people that feel themselves, that want to be free and want to express themselves. So I thought that when I got into nightlife culture, it was in 1985 at a roller skating rink. I was spinning gospel music and playing gospel music. While at the radio station WBMB at the time, I discovered house music and fell in love with it. I transitioned that to Hunter College, where Phi Beta Sigma introduced me to the college circuit scene. And there's a 40-year history I could spend so much time talking
You
about.
guys gotta buy the book.
So the
Don't give
book
it
is
away. Get the
outside,
book.
but it really details a number of places, people, and this royalty right here in this room that represents some of the actual progress I've made in my journey of house music. We have Conrad here from Together in Spirit, Curvin Mark from my friend Curvin Mark, Brian Polite. There are so many representatives here that are in this book that, and if we don't document our story, then our story will be lost. So I'm grateful I'm here, and thank you so much for having me.
Mhm. That's a
Honored
closing
also to
question.
be here. Hi everyone. I feel nightlife is the reason why I came to this city. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I was abroad for about 9 years, and I yearned for that international vibe, that the crazy thing that happens here when you get here, you just know it. It's New York, right? And I really loved the video that had, that this person saying nightlife is what you do when you don't work. And that's what I did, going out to bars and clubs after work and starting to get involved with the nonprofit sector. And I really had to learn what that was 35 years ago. But then we started this dance advocacy in 2005, 2 years before Dance Parade happened. So that was a real thing of like, why are they saying dance is not legal? What's up with that? And so we make T-shirts. Dance is not a crime. We did Dance Parade, and then we had more T-shirts that said Dance Police. Ticketing people for not dancing, which is what Giuliani's administration was doing, right?
Yeah.
They had a cabaret task force, and they were fining and shutting down clubs. And I was like, this is important. I want to be more involved. And so 22 years later, here we are.
Can you tell us a little? This kind of already led. We already started on our next question. So if you want to talk a little bit about the cabaret law, what that was, what the impact was on the ability to dance. I don't know how. I don't want to age anyone in the group. I was definitely one of those people who went out and was told to stop dancing, or went to a spot one night and was dancing, and then the following week it was like, no, you can't dance here because we got fined last week. So could you talk about a little bit about the cabaret law?
Yeah, so like I was saying, we kind of discovered this thing, and it was like it's wrong. So let's make people aware. And I was with a group called Metropolis in Motion, and it was just we were organizing dances and kind of protest events around dance in front of Mayor Bloomberg's home. And then later on, we did this. it was a dance marathon the night before. Paul Chevigny and Norman Siegel represented 4 groups of dancers in the state Supreme Court. It was the coldest day of the year, and they did this dance marathon. Crazy, right? So we were like, okay, we got to do this. We got to bring out the press and do something crazy. And they ended up, we didn't know how it was going to, be ruled. They ended up losing. But in the meantime, I was like, let's do dance parade. Let's do something bigger. And that's what we did. We just very creatively got people together. And then over the years, meeting all kinds of other advocacy groups. And, we weren't the first. There were groups before us, the Dance Liberation Front, Legalized Dancing NYC. We have the Artist Coalition here with Jamie and Ali Coleman and Kashana, Jor, all these other people like along the way have joined. And, like you have heroes, we have heroes too in the advocacy world. It's so great. So it's just so important to keep the work going. We thought the cabaret law, repealing that, it'd be over, but then there's zoning.
Mhm.
And that took 6 years, 5 years. No, wait a minute. 2017 was the cabaret law, and then
Yeah.
2024.
2027
right?
years, yeah. The city of yes, yeah, 2024.
Yeah, and then, okay, the community boards are still telling their people, okay, you can, point out that club and that would try to shut them down with the SLA laws. That's like a
State
whole
liquor
nother.
authority.
Right.
Yep.
So, wow, that took a little bit of thinking around, like, how do you approach Governor Hochul? And there, thanks to the Hospitality Alliance, really, who had the lobbyists and everything, they actually had me do a 5-page, statement, and I sent that off. But I was really thinking, like, they're going to create another cabaret law. They're going to license dancing. It almost happened where we had a whole nother thing statewide. And they somehow they changed their minds. I don't know the backstory yet, but only a month ago they lifted those restrictions. So you can now dance in bars and restaurants. But the music, as Mr. Garcia here so eloquently said, we have to address the music issue. So the work's not done.
So to add to that, the reason why we have to go back to Happy Land in 1990, of the reason why these policies was enforced, right? During that time, Larry Levan, after the Paradise Garage closed, Larry Levan went and started DJing at the Choice. And Frankie Knuckles had come in from Chicago. And Richard Vasquez, there was a space called the Choice, but it was originally called the Loft. David Mancuso was the person that obviously held the space. And David invited Richard Vasquez to come and take over because he wanted to take a sabbatical. Richard Vasquez brought in Frankie Knuckles and he brought in Larry Levan. And because we had a church connection, me and Richard Vasquez, he brought me in. Inevitably, I was the one that had experienced when the task force after the Happy Land fire shut down the Choice. I was doing a Thursday night alternating with Larry Levan, but in April of 1990, that's when I found out that it shut down. Like Hervin Mark and Herb Martin, we were part of a college nightlife infrastructure, okay? And we were doing events at Baruch College, at Hunter College, at St. John's University, all these different venues. And when the Sean Combs incident happened, which was the St. John Stampede happened, that enforced it even more. So the book really details how we got here. There was a lot of crime. We were coming from the HIV AIDS crisis as well as the crack cocaine epidemic. So all of these forces and the crime is the reason why New York City instituted these policies. But through that, there was a collective of dancers, promoters, and DJs that wanted to make sure that we still had our sanctuaries to dance, our freedoms to dance, and this is what the book, The Beat, the Scene, the Sound talks about.
All right. I love it because like y'all answered all the questions. No, so something that I've really grappled with is how much should be done around nightlife advocacy. So part of nightlife for many people is the anonymity of it and the underground element. So being under the radar in order to create and enjoy yourself. But nightlife is and has been very political, and it has been regulated and restricted by government. Historically, people, as you mentioned, people have found ways to get around this, but it can also be at the expense of people's well-being and safety. Um, I realized, oh, I was like, gonna ask, say, if you wanted, we talked about you talked about that was like a whole intro to a question that you already answered. So, but like going back to your book, David, one thing I did really appreciate is the mention of these different artists and different people, specifically the ones that came out of Farragut houses. So you could talk about Grandmaster Flowers, you talk about Shannon, but you wrote about parts of New York City music culture that people don't often cover, particularly local TV and radio, like Video Music Box, which is my personal favorite, and college radio stations. What parts of New York City music and nightlife culture do you think have been erased or are not well documented? And what would you tell young people today about documenting their scenes?
Well, documenting is important. I come from the lineage of Grandmaster Flowers. Grandmaster Flowers was one of the pioneer mobile DJs, along with Maboya, Plummer, Pete DJ Jones, that brought the nightlife infrastructure to the streets. And this spirit is still carrying on today when you listen to Soul Summit and the outside venues that they do. You might go to see Natasha Diggs at Soul in a Horn.
Yeah,
So
public service.
yeah, so all of these events outside spawned from some of the originators in the very, very beginning. And I think that it's not just a Manhattan situation, but we have to look at nightlife infrastructure and document it in all of the boroughs. Lynn Q from X Clan, a rap group in the 1990s, she was the one that introduced me to my first space in Queens, which was Mystery. And it was the first time the book had documented something, a nightlife infrastructure that happened in Queens. There were a lot of sobering recovery communities. The best parties in New York were, would be people reference the Loft, the Paradise Garage, the Shelter, and Body and Soul. All of those venues had no alcohol. And those were safe sanctuary spaces where people could dance. Now you would have to pay more to be in these events because that the trade-off was if you didn't drink, you had to spend more money. But there were places where you can get the best music. So we need to document other boroughs. Naeem Johnson in New Jersey had a place for the 12-step program, the Narcotics Anonymous. They implemented events at a place called Black Box. And it was another space that broke a lot of music that came out of there that culturally resonates with us today. The music and the venues that made all of this possible was so important, and we need to document not just the DJs, but the dancers, the people that contribute and make our scene run.
Thank you. I love it. Y'all were very, very thorough. I am a big supporter of learning through the past because I'm gonna editorialize and say that this is something that we don't do enough when it comes to planning and policy. It can take time to do a proper look back, and nobody wants to look back and admit mistakes that they have made. But we aren't perfect, and lessons learned from the past can ensure a better future. I've learned so much so far with this project. And one of the things I hope my project does is show people and remind people that nightlife was not something found in certain pockets of the city. And these spaces are important. So, as you mentioned, like all of these spaces outside of Manhattan. So, what functions did these historic nightlife spaces serve beyond entertainment? And where do you see those functions existing today? So, I'm going to start with Greg on this one.
Some of the most unique places I think about are like House of Yes, where it really is like a petri dish to try out new ways of being. I remember early on they would have like consent culture signs posted everywhere because, as they dance free and really feel the vibe of the nightlife scene, they might have people, come up to you and grab you or whatever, and they just, there was a time when there was a trend for consent culture, right? So I feel like they led really well in that regard. And there's other, you learn things from going to different types of new nightlife culture. I'm more of a dancer than I would say I'm a drinker. So I actually really love, the spaces like Vinyl. I used to go to Vinyl. And I'm more like Five Rhythms. I don't know if anybody knows the Five Rhythms dance community. That's I just completely go full on dancing there and anywhere where there's a good DJ. Um, yeah, but I do want to just mention how I think it's important to recognize the responsibility of nightlife that we have, like to some degree, to operate within certain government standards. And David mentioned, the 1990 fire that changed a lot. There was also, I think, in the 2007s, the 2007-8, when they had a lot of violence in nightclubs. So we were out there trying to get the word out. Let's reform and get rid of the cabaret law, but it wasn't going to happen because there was violence in nightclubs. So it's like timing is really important to get it right, and this could be the time. This is the sweet spot right now.
What I see today is resilience. And when I look at certain people in our scene, like a Becky Nunez, they inspire me because they understand that when one room closes, another room opens. And I'm grateful that she's here today because the women in our scene and the people in our scene in general have done a lot for our community to keep the infrastructure the way it is. They organize, like yourself. You don't wait for anybody. You have your lot radio show. They advocate for themselves and they create their own channels of communication. And in my day, I had a radio show that ran for 10 years on 91.5 WNYE. And what we did was collectively, we built an infrastructure of where people can go when basically music had abandoned house music. There was a time when people did not like house music and house music was frowned upon. But there were heroes like Louis Vega and Barbara Tucker and Don Welch at Underground Network that built their infrastructure to keep the music going, to keep the scene going, to keep our life going as a sanctuary. And so what the young people are doing today, I'm very proud of, because what you're doing right now, you're setting the precedents for the future. And there's not enough time to talk about this right now, but we hope that you do more series that can let people pour in and express themselves as far as what we can do collaboratively and work with each other in that case. Thank you.
Thank you.
The tools change, but the spirit's the same.
That's
So we appreciate the
right.
spirit.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, enough of us or me talking rather. I'm gonna open this up if folks just to a Q&A. I'm just gonna ask because this is a hybrid. I'm gonna ask to ask your question through the mic and yeah, so does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists, and for this space. I'm curious, when it comes to some of the spaces, you mentioned that there's always been political. The mayor has been campaigning through both the spaces for himself before he was the mayor, and then now these newer elections in clubs like Paragon and others. I'm really curious, like, how do you feel about these spaces kind of being utilized in that way, where like one night there's like a DSA event that pops up, or some type of like other ways of like doing political rallies in nightclubs. I think Sugar Hill did one, I'm not mistaken, as well, or like ASAP Rocky was there. So yeah, I'm really curious about like how you feel about like politics in these spaces. Yeah, for both. Yeah, for both panelists.
It's an interesting question. I think that nightclubs should be used not just super late at night. Why not open early to have, a political party or something, and then dance. Don't just talk, but make sure you're moving and enjoying the nightlife with the lights and the music and everything as well. Like, I think that should be the condition. Okay, Mayor Mamdani, you can come here, but we want to see you actually bust some moves. Yeah.
Actually, there's been a couple of Caribbean parties where he has kind of busted them a little bit, and so he does love his Caribbean music. And one of the things, yeah, so I think that when you're aligned with public advocates and the mayor, it says a lot about the progress of where we've been, and we can learn a little bit from New Jersey because right now they have 10,000-watt sound systems, the best festivals in New Jersey because of alignment. And I think that we need to be more in alignment a little bit with the officials that are trying to help us see our way into our situation. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to say for the folks on Zoom, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. We will absolutely answer your questions.
My question is, how do you feel social media has impacted the nightlife scene, the dancers and the DJs? How do you think social media has impacted the nightlife scene from the dancers' perspective and from the DJ's perspective?
I think that social media has created dancers to become and showcase and become better DJs than some of the founding DJs. Because when I look at a co-flow, when I look at people that were dancers, some of them are great DJs. Now, when it comes to the actual DJs, it depends on the social infrastructures you're talking about. Because it's a political situation when you're trying to get into work at Nebula or maybe gospel or the dinner and dancing hybrids. It's all about networking and association. Who you're associated with will carry you further and let you know where you need to go. But starting your own events and cutting your own way out is something I found that is a necessity in today's market. And I think it definitely can be helped. I think that it is harder for DJs today because of social media. It is definitely harder. You cannot just say, I'm talented and I can just play. And no, they won't let you in the door. First of all, some of these nightclubs are supported by tech support, all of these other agencies that bypass even letting you see a club owner. So you don't even get to see the club owner. You got to go through a certain kind of agency. Then they're going to look at your algorithm, your numbers, and then that'll define whether you get the work at some of these esteemed clubs, getting the money that you know that you're worth getting paid. I don't want to belabor too much on this, but if you want to talk to me afterwards, I have a sheet that showcases. Listen, I bought a Anybody that buys the book can definitely get an outline of why nightclubs closed, shows you who was in it, who was involved. You talk about Paradise Garage, Loft, Le Souk, all of the venues, because obviously I've played in 500 nightclubs that's been documented online. So you can see 40 years of history in nightlife infrastructure. Sorry.
Hi. I found out about this event just like a few hours ago. Jada Lorraine posted it, so I'm really glad I saw that.
Shouts to Jada.
Thank you for doing this. This is amazing. I have a podcast where I interview DJs and producers, and a lot of the places you mentioned, I one of the challenges I have with documentation is like kind of connecting like metadata. I don't know. I feel like I could map a lot of this stuff with the work you've done, and I would love to talk about that. But I just wanted to comment on this is really great.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming and shouts. And Jada, Lorraine, and I, we've done a few convenings around reimagining New York nightlife space because we know that things aren't so great and that there could be better. And we've had a really extra have been in the conversations. A few of you, I think, in the room have been a part of the conversations. We're going to keep that going because we want to advance them. A lot of great things have come up from it. So I know it sounds weird because like nightlife and advocacy and getting together in the daytime to talk about like policy, but it's important. And I'm glad that y'all are here because I don't feel so strange anymore. So I guess we have another question over
I just
here.
want to say I'd
Oh.
love to connect the dots. I have flyers that we
Oh.
scan too
Oh
from
yeah,
all these
absolutely.
clubs.
No,
So
absolutely. That would be great. No, we would definitely. I would love it.
Okay.
We can exchange. I'm gonna
Great,
find you. I
yeah.
have info.
Okay,
We can
thanks for
exchange
doing this.
info. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has resuscitated me, and I appreciate this conversation. So Greg, there's something that you and I touched on recently. I work with Dance Parade New York, by the way, so I'm not a plant. This work it's very personal to me, and I've found myself really celebrating the spirit of New York in ways that I haven't. I've been here for 30 years plus. Anyways, I won't date myself. In any case, you said something to me, Greg, that was like, it kind of like shook me in my boots in terms of, it almost sounded to me like splitting hairs. I'm sure you can describe it better, but the splitting of hairs was if you can have a jukebox, if you can have a DJ, what type of music you can have. And when I think about the city we're in, I feel like that was so discouraging for me to think that humans worked so hard on things to separate us rather than connect us. So you've got some new stuff happening with ways to engage. Can you just break it down for the layman? Like, what are the steps? What can we do? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kashana. What I think you're referring to is what's still the work to do with the state liquor authority, and what Jeff Garcia mentioned. So a lot of what happens in laws are just like, left over from the last changes, and things just over time become crazy. And so they still have stipulations on the what's called a method of operation on a liquor license that says, no DJs or no live music or something like that. And it goes through the community board, so they have, and no venue wants to stick their necks out to kind of like ask for a DJ or something like that. So what we want to do is have a campaign that says, sign a petition, let's talk to the governor's people and just eliminate that requirement. And you can do that by going to legalizedance.org. And that's where we have Let the Music Play New York. And there's a petition. And if you're an organization, you can also sign on at the bottom. And so, yeah, we got to have numbers to make a difference. Thanks.
We have, okay, just a petition.
It's not necessarily a question. I just want to add to what Greg is saying with that is like, listen, we need help, here in government. I often see that time that Obama was at a rally and somebody was heckling him about something, and then he started going about like, I can't do this alone, right? There are laws in this country and he needs help. We need help in doing this. So we need you to reach out to, this is more of a state situation, but we need you to identify who your state representatives are, who your state senator is, who your assemblyman is or assembly person. And you need to talk to them because they're the ones that are going to make the changes at the state level to make this happen, right? Now, at the city level, we also need to encounter with our city council folks, right? Because who puts people on the community boards? It's your borough president and your city council folks. So they need to be aware of what's going on. So this takes a whole of government, a whole of advocacy approach to this. And we can make it happen. You know why? Because we already did. We already did with the changes to dancing. So we can make this happen as well. And I think there's an appetite for it now, right? It didn't happen right now because sometimes government goes slow. They can't do everything at once, right? Because then that would be too great. But there is definitely a pathway to this. So I look forward. Please, all of you, follow our office at NYC Nightlife Gov and reach out to us. And we can connect you with the people that you need to be connected with. Obviously, other than Greg and the Hospitality Alliance and other groups out there, but know who your representatives are because that's who you need to talk to. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. I think it's beautiful and the work that you're doing, it's very important. And we often talk about nightlife and inclusivity and accessibility in terms that, of course, we include LGBTQ plus community, and it's all very important. But do we see somewhere in this infrastructure that accessibility is actually towards more disabled people, with less able people can also benefit, or if there were venues such as, or, we like to romanticize the past and it's beautiful, but there also are some problems. And if it comes in the picture and if it does, how you see it as an urban planner.
That's a really good question. And actually, that's something that I didn't even think about, which is why it's good to have these conversations to figure out. And this is a conversation. Well, my next conversation is actually with the Department of Buildings to figure out information on like venue size. And I believe that they do. Yeah, I mean, I used to work in construction, so you do have to note certain disability requirements. So this could be something that I also I'm taking note of this. Figure out how we could include that information because yeah, I'm sure a lot of that information. Yeah, and even if the spaces might have been technically may have even met the guidelines, they may not have even like registered because they don't want to be held to the requirements of accessibility. So this is good to know, and something I didn't think about. So thank you.
That was a great question. My name's Jamie Burkhardt. I'm a member of the New York City Artists Coalition, and I am a cultural archivist. And so I'm so inspired by these uh, uh, data collecting mavens of culture. I'm working on cultural space rent stabilization for New York City. So it'd be like what we have in housing, where there's a board that sets the maximum amount that rent can go up for all the cultural spaces in New York City. And that's been introduced at the state, and that has been uh, Crystal Hudson wants to introduce it at the city level, and Julie Menon isn't allowing her to bring the bill. But I'm curious, 50 all these places that have closed, how much has rent played a factor in this? Are there any stories where rent has factored in?
Yes, there's been plenty of situations. Well, obviously, we think of when the Paradise Garage closed, the lease was up. There were venues where obviously owners could not maintain. I was one of the first DJs to play in the Bottle Service Club. I played at Spy Bar, 1998. Okay, and I played deep into the bottle service infrastructure. Kane, Quo, Guest House, Pink Elephant, Greenhouse. I did the opening, so I know that these venues open and close in a whim, and they're gone. And the next thing you know, they're on to the next thing. The nightlife infrastructure and these venues are pressured. There's regulation pressure that they feel that they cannot continue because it's not financially viable for them. Sometimes promoters move from space to space, and in the 2000s, they dictated how good or bad your venue was and your reputation. And when it wasn't trendy enough, you sunk like a ship. And so these are some of the realities that I experienced, and I also documented in the book of, what the bottle service culture was really about in its instance from the start and who was a part of it. And I would encourage you to do some. If you want to do some background, you can definitely get some history on that.
And then also in the presentation, part of the things that I'm documenting in terms of closure reason, if I can find that rent was the factor, I'm noting that in the database.
Oh, I'll jump in. Now I gotta change my question because that just third eye thing. But first, there was a point where politicians did have to go to nightclub to like, oh, you want the gay vote, so you're going to Stonewall, or you're the Broadway, or you're the rep for the Midtown, you go to Broadway. Like it was just a thing. But now my now changed question is, I think now for you, like perfect world, like if you were given a larger grant, like what would be the big end goal for this? Because now if you're tracking like rent changes across time, there's power in that. Or if you're just tracking history, there's a certain power in that. But like, yeah, million bajillion dollars, what would be your goal for
Oh
this?
my God, it would be a whole thing. It would be an archive, but it would be policy driven as well. I would love to have conversations. What I really want to have, like, this is even, I mean, if I just had a little bit of money, what I want to talk about really is equity and ownership. My issue, and this is historic, and I'm by no means an expert, but even just from what I've been reading and also my own experiences, very few spaces in New York were Black owned. So you were mentioning even earlier, you mentioned Bentley's, you mentioned the Shadow. Yeah, and these were like spaces that were frequented by Black people. They were not Black owned. I was underage when I went to the Shadow.
Brooklyn has its own a whole new
23 to go to the Shadow, and I was not 23. But anyway, so like, I would want to talk about that, and I do, and it's something that persists today. We have had, part of what I had put on the wall in the presentation. I had Bedvine Brew, which was Black owned. Ode to Babel, Black owned. Buntins, Black owned. These are spaces that we've lost recently. Then people have also lamented the loss of other spaces that they thought were Black owned, which were not. So I really want to talk about that. I really want to talk about even like how the way clubs operate. I know there's a lot of things to be said about promoters. There are a lot of things to be said about in-house bookers and the pros and cons to both. When I became legal to go dance, my thing was doing the bougie Black thing. So I was at the Black Diamonds events because I thought it was so cute. I thought it was so cute. go to these bougie, events. But my thing, and now I think about it now in hindsight, is that it must have cost so much money for them to put these events on, to go to these white-owned spaces, to say, hey, we want to bring some Black people in here. And then for them to be like, oh, well, that sounds like a liability. That sounds like a problem. We're going to charge you. And then to then have all of these Black people come in, beautifully dressed, impeccable, having a great time, them realizing that they can make money. So having them come back again and again, again and again, but never saying, hey, we should open a club together. And this is something that exists today. We have events, and I don't want to, I'm going to shout them out because they're dope events. And I, like Poppy Juice, like Everyday People. These are clubs that are bringing in tens of thousands of dollars every time they do an event at these spaces. And where are these club owners who are taking these tens of thousands of dollars or getting a cut of that, saying, hey, why don't we go in on a business venture? I want to talk to those, I want to talk to Black Diamonds promoters. I want to talk to these folks and say, has anyone ever talked to you about ownership and what, because I don't think so. Honestly, my hunch is that no. And really talk about how we can tap into accessing spaces that are affordable so there can be cooperatively owned spaces. So I want to kind of do a whole lot of things, but I feel like the archiving piece is important because people need to know the history, but people need to know the policy. But I want to advance the conversation so that we can talk about ownership equity and talking about a better distribution, not a situation where we have nightlife zones or places relegated to the margins, that we have nightlife in different forms in different parts of the city and throughout the city.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about Black ownership and nightlife infrastructure, Frank's Lounge comes to mind in Brooklyn, as well as Langston's, which was the last Black operated and owned venue in Brooklyn, New York. It's now turned into
Caviar was, oh, listen.
so we're talking about Moe's Lounge,
Caviar. Listen.
which he now owns. So
yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about Black infrastructure and Black owned, Brooklyn is a place where you'll find a lot of those spaces, and I'm grateful for Calvin Rock for the contribution that he's done for nightlife infrastructure. But he's someone that you can probably speak to that, and as far as how things are zoned, probably how things are done. But there are some Black infrastructure. I mean, I'll go back all the way back to Brown's Guest House for the historical. You had places like COCP and, just a ton of Black-owned spaces that knew how to handle infrastructure, ways around rent. You'll find some of that in the book.
Yeah. So I think we have one, honestly, we have this is so good, but we gotta get out of here soon. So I think we have one more. Oh, what? Okay. And then one more. So two more questions.
Hi. I'm not sure I have a fully formed question yet, but I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this conversation around the so-called cycle of a nightclub, where a party or a club, starts kind of underground, usually by Black and brown and or queer communities, right, as safe spaces for them. And then especially in New York or really everywhere, people are like, oh, I want to be where the cool people are. And then so people start seeing that, and then people not from the community kind of move there, and it just becomes not just becomes it some often becomes a space where those original community members are pushed out, right? And then when those original community members are pushed out, then it's no longer cool, right? Because they take this capital of cool with them. And then, those new people are like, oh, well, this isn't cool anymore. And so oftentimes clubs will shut down. And that's really, really simplifying it. And that's not the case for every club, right? And I guess my background is I'm a house head, and so often these house parties are so fun, and then often these really famous club house parties, I hear a lot of my dance friends be like, oh, there's too many, it's not fun anymore, no one's dancing, we go elsewhere, and so yeah, and I'm curious because the margins in nightlife are really small, and oftentimes people throw parties and lose money on parties. And so there's this thing of well, we need some sort of capital, we need something to sustain this, to have some space, but yeah, is there room for everybody? And yeah, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think there's room for, I mean, that's part of why being here, being in New York, it is a demonstration of that there is room for everyone. I mean, the way people interact with nightlife and there is a cyclical nature. If it's not that, it probably still is. It used to be that it would be a spot open, catering to celebrities, then catering to people, then maybe they would let Black people promote in there, and then they would close it, and then they would open up a few months later, something new. That's also another kind of life cycle of a club. But I think it's just a matter of like people. Part of my issue too is with people being displaced and people leaving New York, that those are lost opportunities for people to come and do some really cool shit here.
I mean, we have public records nowadays, Soul on the Horn. There are venues where you can go and it's populated by both. And obviously there's history of that. You talked about APT, and there was a party in the 2000s that was really popular called Bang the Party with E-Man and Laura. And these parties travel from space to space, and they were hit parties. And inevitably, sometimes certain communities come in and they're no longer cool anymore. And people move out. And you do have instances of that. But I think in today's infrastructure, if you go to Deadline of Nine or if you go to certain other venues out here now, the infrastructure has widened because the events have widened. You have rooftop events. So if there's more of the events, but I think the resident DJ has also a part to play in it because the death of the resident DJ has definitely made a dent in the scene as we know it. So it's been very much about looking at the club, seeing what the club looks like. Oh, it's beautiful, but the soul of it is gone. And so we'll be looking at nightlife infrastructure and the different varying people that play a part in it. That's something that you have to look at as well.
Thank you to the person who asked the question before because it perfectly lined mine up. And before I go into my question, I will say RIP Brew, it is owned now by a Haitian woman. So shout out to that because it's still alive and going. It's now called Hatch. Yeah, you guys should pull up. But my question was if you guys could speak on the role of privacy in nightlife, just about that question prior, thinking about the way in which, at least my generation, we're all throwing more parties now. We're all organizing. We're all going to Bossa Nova and different clubs, and we have these residencies, these resident parties that are happening. However, in order to promote them and to make money so we can keep on having these parties, we do have to make a bit of a spectacle of ourselves on social media. And I think that limits the privacy that actually cultivates this culture. So I wanted to ask, because you guys were able to get the word out without social media and to have all these communities by, I would assume, word of mouth and flyers and physical media, how you would suggest maintaining the privacy that actually builds culture while still actually making ends meet, because a lot of people are making these events to make rent. It's not only for the love of dancing. Everything kind of has it's a double edge with everything that we do now. Everyone wants to be an artist, but we also have to not starve. So I wanted to know if you guys had any solutions and if you could speak on the role of privacy.
That's a great question. And I mean, I don't even know the answer. I mean, for honestly, part of it, I think it's really challenging too if people do get their information or consume social media and they don't want to pursue or interest in like a newsletter or other, and then also because we have fewer third spaces. I mean, when I was going out, we would hand out flyers for our events at different parties, but then also at Turntable Lab or at Beat, at Fat Beats and different places. So if that lack also makes it challenging too, because you can't get people in other spaces. But I also think now people have their appetite is starting to turn. They don't like the idea, like having to like do that. You said the way you said, make a spectacle of yourself. I think engaging your community outside of these events is important. Especially if you have folks, I think if you're getting them in the room, figuring out a way to keep them or keep in contact with them outside. And I do, email, text, whatever is working best, and thinking about alternative activities that might engage them in a way that or interest them in another way. Activism. I mean, don't do it for the performance of it. I mean, but if there are meaningful things that that would impact your community that you want to educate them about, I mean, that's a lot of what I do. It's just like there are things that I wanted people to know about, and so like let's just get people in the room and see who shows up and see who cares. And that's a good way to just, I think, build a community in general. And that can be where we can do activist things together and do advocacy together, but then we can also party together because we should be doing both.
So spectacle and performative DJing, spectacle, performative nightlife is a business model, right? That we all realize. If you go to Refuge in Brooklyn, they'll put your phone and they'll tell you to tape your phone. There's certain no phone policies in venues that people have implemented and respected, and I think that people are working around the no camera audiences that we have on social media today that is so effective in nightlife. And I think that what we can do is, obviously, if you've built your database, your mailing list, and so forth, they should know that whoever you're rolling with, that this is not tolerable, that's not acceptable. And as long as your people know that it's not something acceptable, I think they will follow it in order for it to sustain itself as a great party.
I have one more question. Dang, we've run out of time, but.
So this is a good way to wrap it up. Thank you. This is thank you for doing this. And you and I have talked about many things offline. But my last question was in your data collection, which I'm very excited about. I didn't notice, and maybe I missed it, are you also capturing data that shows how many of these venues were Black owned and which venues were women owned? I'm very interested in that as well, because I think we'll see trends and we'll also spot the concerns and the issues that we've seen historically around ownership that looks like us.
Yeah. No, I'll say that. And their answer is no. It's funny because and the person sitting next to you, Ben, we actually talked about this because of we know that we just know that there was a lot of criminal mob involvement in spaces. So while people might have, signing the paperwork and may have on paper, they may have appeared to be owned by certain people, but they were in fact owned and controlled by others. It's not something that it's not like I can't go back to it. But it was something that I thought might be just a little bit too much just because of that, but maybe even noting, probably not deeds because a lot of spaces were rented, but maybe thinking about who, like getting the information on who signed the liquor license, whose name was on the liquor license I think could be helpful. Something I came across recently and I haven't dug into was there, in the late 70s, there was a group of Black men who owned a number of nightlife spaces. And I found, somebody sent me the article, and the photograph that they took or that they had was actually taken by my mom's cousin. So I was like, oh, this is a sign. So I'm like really excited about like digging into that because they had owned some spaces in New York, and that people don't really talk about too much. But I do think it is important, but a lot of it's muddy because of the way things were run back then. And a lot of what I've read is like mob. And it still is. Yes, exactly. Still is. So, okay, one more.
My name is Conrad, and my organization is called Together in Spirit, and celebrating 30 years of doing Together in Spirit in New York City this year. And I want to mention that Demerara's on 28th Street, where I did my party for 9 years there, 9 of the 30 is Black owned, or was Black owned, and the owner owned the building, Rare. And he sold the building, and he called me after he sold the building, and he said, Conrad, he said, I got to get out of New York. He said, I did well, I had my time, but New York is he can't compete anymore. So he had to go to another kind of market, like he went to Florida. But I just want to mention Demerara's, and he's from Guyana. And I purposely did my party there every weekend because it was Black owned, because I know it's a rare thing. And having that money to flow in that, in that club, like our monies were going, to his family, to his young kids who eventually went to college. So it helped his community, his family. I've been partying since the 70s. and I have never stopped. I have seen the change of the scene. And in reference to Black ownership, that's been a problem since the beginning. Ain't nothing new and ain't nothing changed. Unfortunately, and yes, there's been some change. I'm just being, a little sarcastic, but basically many of it and the scene of the underground, and I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna say it, and you can disagree if you want, but the scene of the underground scene started with Black and Latino gay folk, the underground scene. And it has changed, it has morphed, it has expanded, and now we're at a point where it's so super expensive. Because I was on a hiatus for a while and I came back last year and started doing events again. I was like, damn. It's really very complicated, very expensive. But what I'm clear of, what has me to come back to provide the service of providing a place where people can release on the dance floor is because we know what's going on in this country and in this world. People need places to release and let go with positive energy and messages. And we need to be social. We have to be social. And I was cool. I was retired. I'm good. I'm serious. I was traveling and so it's challenging, and yet the focus should be about providing a service for people to be social, because club scene is social dancing. It's not performative dancing, it's social dancing where we connect and we touch and I want to say this is a little controversial. We don't talk about the gentrification on the dance floor, but I do, and I will. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but we're not engaging in conversations about that because there's a lot of hurt feelings around it. So we need to talk. We need to have more of these panel discussions and Q&As and stuff like that, because we really are one. And at the same time, this this positive, uplifting music is a gift for us. So if we got to continue to fight, like, remember when the law passed with the cabaret law, it was Halloween. I can remember being down in City Hall. I can't remember the year. 2017, thank you. I'm older now. So, but so yeah, we have to fight, but we have to fight and be more strategic. And we have to approach, this is my opinion, approach the mayor, the governors, the political people, the business people, approach them from the heart. Because what we provide for this city, and we have for years, the reason why New York City is fabulous is because it was a joyful place to release and let go and dance. And, we have to educate them. It is not just about a party. I'm 70 years old. And people, some younger people said to me, "You still going to parties?" It's beyond a party for me. It is life. It is therapy. You know what I'm saying? And so this thing around the gentrification, we got to talk. Because we have these little grumbling conversations, certain people on the dance floor. I have gone from it being predominantly gay to now, and then it became mixed, but it was predominantly Black and Latino, and now there's a lot of white folks on the dance floor, but you know what I'm saying? We really have to talk. And one more thing, and I'm sorry it takes so long. Your term nightlife, I would suggest that you think about expanding the terminology of it, because there's this scene has merged, and now there's all of these dance parties outdoors and the parks, and all of us have different opinions, and it's too saturated, but it is a part of this culture. So I think we have to continue to think broader. And then there's day parties. My party was like a tea dance, for years. And so thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I wish we could keep going, but we cannot. Thank you all who are on the webinar. Thank you for hanging in there. I hope you guys had some really just enjoyed it. I hope you all enjoyed this. I do hope that this continues again. Please, we have your email addresses. And we will hopefully contact you. But we would definitely love to keep these conversations going. If you all, we kind of have to leave, but if you want to continue these conversations as we are leaving, please, everyone's got their name tags, chat with each
And
other.
don't forget to take some food.
And yes, please take
And
some
also,
food.
and also stop by to get a book.
Yes, we have a
Yeah,
few more
please
copies
support.
left. Please support the book.